Nobody expected this night to mean anything. Not the producers setting up the desk, not the camera crew adjusting the lights, not the league executives half watching from their phones. To them, it was just another harmless segment, another crossover moment, another cute idea for a broadcast. Bring the rookie in, let her smile, let her talk, then wrap it up and move on. Simple, safe, forgettable. But that's not what happened. Somewhere during those 2 hours, the air changed. Not loud, not dramatic, just wrong. The kind of wrong you only recognize once it's too late. Phones started buzzing. Group chats blew up. Executives leaned toward each other, whispering like somebody had leaked classified information. And suddenly, without anyone planning it, Caitlin Clark didn't look like a guest. She looked like the star of the entire show. And that's what scared them. Because leagues depend on control. Control the narrative. Control the spotlight. Control who becomes the face of the sport. But what do you do when someone bypasses the entire system? When a player refuses to wait their turn? When fame shows up uninvited? That's where the Real story begins. The broadcast opens normally. Highlights rolling. Crowd noise underneath. Analysts laughing at the desk. Then the host casually drops it. Joining us tonight, Caitlin Clark. No dramatic music. No intro package. Just a simple sentence. But the second the camera cuts to her, everything tightens. The room sits up straighter. The energy snaps into focus. She doesn't look nervous. She doesn't look overwhelmed. She doesn't even look like a rookie grateful for a moment on TV. She looks calm. Too calm. Like she's been here her entire life. And that's the problem. Because rookies aren't supposed to look like this. Rookies are supposed to be jittery, smile too wide, talk too fast, look excited just to be included. But she didn't. She leaned back, relaxed, and started breaking down plays like a 10-year veteran. And that was the moment the league realized. This wasn't a feature. This wasn't a cameo. This was a takeover.
Talked about how I think it was when Luka was back on the Mavericks, they in a way played, faster and more together, or the ball popped more. I think that's what it was. The ball moved more without Luka out there. So Clark referencing Luka with some of the stuff around her and Stephanie White, and the butting heads narratives from last year will be amusing. But, again, Caitlin Clark just playing basketball is important. And she did.
She started calling out defensive mistakes before the replay even rolled, correcting former NBA players live on air like it was nothing. And that's when viewers snapped to attention, not because of hype, but because of authority. She didn't sound confident. She sounded like the smartest person at the table. And that is dangerous, because authority isn't handed out. Authority is taken. Within minutes, social media exploded. Clips spreading everywhere. People rewinding, replaying, commenting. Wait, she's better than half these analysts. How is she this relaxed? Why does she look like she owns the show? Suddenly, the conversation wasn't about the game anymore. It was about her. Always her. And then something subtle, but massive, shifted. The show stopped feeling like an NBA broadcast that happened to feature Caitlin Clark. It started feeling like Caitlin Clark's broadcast, with everyone else playing supporting roles. And that's a problem for people who like control. Because when the guest becomes the attraction, the network loses control of the spotlight. Inside WNBA headquarters,
figure in basketball in the women's game right now, or the game in general. So we said, let's have a bigger conversation. And it's just so crazy that it feels like every other sport will just come out and say what it is besides the WNBA. The NBA is not scared to acknowledge that there's no more iconic figure in basketball. Not just the women's game, but possibly the game in general than Caitlin Clark. But we would not hear that in the WNBA space. We wouldn't hear that from WNBA media, but the NBA media and the NBA and the league itself is not scared to say it. Like we've seen it when Caitlin does golf events. It just seems like every league but her own is not scared to say the truth. But I do think it's really
staff texting each other. Are you watching this? Since when is she on NBC? Who approved this? Nobody knew. Because nobody expected this. They thought they still had time. Time to manage her exposure. Time to protect the brand. Time to keep her inside their bubble. But NBC Sports didn't wait. They didn't ask. They didn't negotiate. They just called, booked, aired. And suddenly the biggest stage in basketball media belonged to her. Not the league. Her. Then came the moment nobody could ignore. The feed cuts live to Madison Square Garden. Packed arena. NBA night. Bright lights. History everywhere. And the crowd? They're not chanting for the home team, not chanting for the All-Stars. They're chanting one name. Caitlin, 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 inside Madison Square Garden. For a WNBA rookie. That's not normal. That's not marketing. That's a takeover. And takeovers terrify the people in charge. Because when fans choose the player over the brand loses power.
Is what it is. Like, I don't think we're going to see anything too different in that regard, because I guess it's just the way things are in this league, and at least the people outside the league aren't being into like stupidly dumb like they used to be. Like, people in the media were scared to be pro Caitlin Clark 2 years ago because, you know, you were deemed as being problematic if you didn't think Caitlin Clark would actually, in fact, shouldn't have been the number one overall pick, and, you know, all of this stuff. Like, if you weren't 100% anti Caitlin Clark, there was something wrong with you. At least the general media aren't necessarily like that anymore. The WNBA media absolutely are. Like, we've still, the phrase "the Fever are better without Caitlin Clark" is one that was used by commentators. Like, to be fair, at least no one's gone full Cheryl Swoops. The fact Elle Duncan apologizing to Cheryl Swoops is still one of the craziest things. So basically, Elle Duncan said that Cheryl Swoops said Katie Lou Samuelson was more important to the Fever than Caitlin Clark. And that's what Elle Duncan reported that Cheryl Swoops said. Cheryl Swoops did not say that. Cheryl Swoops, in fact, said that implied that Katie Lou Samuelson and Caitlin Clark were of equal importance to the Indiana Fever.